السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في القرآن المجيد والفرقان الحميد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تخونوا الله ورسوله وتخونوا أماناتكم وأنتم تعلمون. Respected brothers and elders, mothers and sisters in Islam, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep us in the company of the righteous in this world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raise us amongst the righteous on the day of Qiyamah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fill our lives with mercy and rahmah, as all of us are in the need of the rahmah and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The ayat of the Quran that I recited in front of you is from the 9th Sipara, the 9th Juz, Surah number 8, which is Surah Al-Anfal, and verse number 27. First, I'll just quickly say the translation of this ayat of the Quran, then I'll give you a little preface and introduction, and we'll go through the details of it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the believers, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, O those who have believed, La takhunu Allah wa rasulah, do not betray Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, nor betray and وَلَا تَخُونُوا أَمَانَاتِكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala further mentions and says, nor betray your trust knowingly. So the ayat of the Quran is, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, O those who have believed, do not betray Allah and the Messenger, nor betray your trust knowingly. This is the ayat of the Quran, just to keep this thought. Second thing to remember before I even tell you the next part of this, tafsir of this ayat of the Quran, there's one thing that we need to really be clear about, brothers and sisters, is that the greatest human beings to ever walk on the face of this earth were the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam, the prophets. And after the prophets, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala selected a group of both men and women to become the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They were known as the Sahaba. And these were those individuals, along with as a human being, we all make mistakes. There's always flaws and wrongs. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised that He has forgiven them. Radiyallahu anhum wa radu. That Allah is radi and pleased with them, and they are pleased and radi with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the greatest gifts and titles that people will receive in Jannah after all of its blessings is the announcement that, oh my servant, I'm happy with you, I will never be dissatisfied with you. This is the biggest announcement that you can receive. And Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'in received this announcement in this world that Allah forgave them. Yes, there were moments, there were times that they might have done something that was not exactly as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had decreed or wanted, but they seek forgiveness. Allah forgave and they accepted His tawbah as well. And they left this world at a time, at a place where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Rasul was happy with them. This is what Sahaba are. That's defined, that is what defines them. So now, keeping this in mind, I want to tell you the next story. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was migrating or he was moving from Mecca towards Medina, if you go back 2 or 3 days, I mentioned there was a group of 6 people that had come in from the area of Yathrib, and they accepted Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he ended up making this hijrah. There was a tribe, there were 2 tribes, famous tribes in Yathrib pre-Medina time, known as Aus and Khazraj. These 2 tribes were those tribes that had feuds and fights for many, many years. And they were fighting amongst themselves for years. So at this moment, these individuals reconciled and issues became better for them. So then what had happened was that there were 3 Jewish tribes that lived in the vicinity of Medina. They were known as Banu Nadir, Banu Qaynuqa, and Banu Qurayza. And I know this is a lot of details in an early Tuesday morning, but just to understand this ayat of the Quran better. So when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam moved to Medina, Aus and Khazraj accepted him. They said, "You are our leader, and of course you take over and you help us establish Medina. You wrote the covenants." And of course things began to move towards the right direction. Now these three Jewish tribes that were living within the vicinity of Yathrib, Medina, two of them had, of course, all of them were causing some sort of issues and problems. But Banu Nadir and Banu Qaynuqa were two tribes that the Nabi of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made a negotiation with and allowed them to leave this particular premise that they were living in and leave to the outskirts towards Syria. And they accepted and they left. There was a third tribe. Their name was Banu Qurayza. This tribe did its best, na'udhu billah, to assassinate the Nabi of Allah in any way possible, to do whatever they could, to the extent they brought him in their own homes and threw a rock where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informed him, and anything and everything that you can imagine they did to Rasulullah just so that they could. And they left no rooms for negotiation. Reason why I'm telling you this is that a lot of time in history, people use this as a base that why did the Prophet ﷺ did to the people of Qurayza what he had not done to anyone else? What was the reason that so many people were killed and all that? And it's a big, big detail, but that's not the point for us to really focus with this ayat of the Quran. This is just the introduction to the larger story of this year. So finally, when a time came and Rasulullah ﷺ besieged the people of Qurayza, Banu Qurayza, for 21 days. They were captured in their own lands. And they were besieged for 21 days. And they said, "Okay, we give up. Tell us what we need to do." So they said, Rasulullah ﷺ said, "If you don't trust me to make the decision on your behalf, you select someone from the Muslims and they'll decide your fate. Because if you think that I'm going to be unfair, you find a person from amongst ourselves that is trustworthy enough for us to make a decision on what should happen to you now." They said, "Let us leave like the people of Banu Nadir left to Syria and other areas." The Nabi of Allah said, "It's too late. You had that choice, you had that privilege, but you continuously did what you did, and that does not allow us to have that sort of treaty anymore. We need to have something else." So they said, "Okay, let's find someone." So at this moment, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Who do you choose?" So they say, "We will choose Sa'ad ibn Mu'az radiallahu anhu." Sa'ad bin Mu'az radiallahu anhu was the leader of the Aus, pre-Islamic time when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had not come in, and he was the most well-spoken individual from amongst the Ansar. And whenever the Ansar of Medina had to say something, they would gather together and they would make him the spokesperson, and he would speak on behalf of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And because Banu Qurayza, Banu Qaynuqa, Banu Nadir had lived in the same area for many years, they had very close relationships. He was the leader of Aus, who had now converted to Islam, and they were the leaders of the Jews that had really good relationships over time because they lived in the same area for many, many years, as leaders, as nobles, as ashraf. They said, let's make him the person to make the decision. Now, pre-decision making, what happened is that Abu Lubaba al-Ansari, his name was Abu Lubaba Abdul Mundar al-Ansari radiallahu anhu, from amongst the Ansar. And remember, brothers and sisters, Ansar are those that Rasulullah said, "Allahumma ighfir lil ansar, abna il ansar, wa abna il ansar, wa jiran il ansar." Oh Allah, forgive my Ansar. Oh Allah, forgive the children of Ansar. Oh Allah, forgive the children of Ansar. Oh Allah, forgive the wives of Ansar. Oh Allah, even forgive the neighbors of Ansar. These are the Ansar that Rasulullah loved so dearly. So his name is Abu Lubaba al-Mundar al-Ansari radiallahu anhu. So Abu Lubaba radiallahu anhu was also amongst the leaders of the Muslim, and he had a very close relationship with the people of Banu Qurayza, because his wife and his children and his family lived in the vicinity of Banu Qurayza. So now when the decision was about to be made, the leaders of Banu Qurayza said, Abu Lubaba, what should we do? Should we take the words of Sa'ad bin Mu'az? Should we take it? So Abu Lubaba radiallahu anhu said, from far away, I made a sign towards my neck and I said, they're going to slaughter you. This is a relationship. And again, I tell you, go back. Sahaba are all udul. They are all forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are the best human beings that ever walked on the face of this earth after the Anbiya. So Abu Lubaba is a Muslim. He's Ansari. He's amongst the great Sahaba. So he said that the Banu Qurayza, before the decision of Sa'ad was about to be made, they said, should we accept his decision? So I pointed towards my neck and I pointed towards it by saying, they're going to slaughter me. He said, as soon as I did this, I realized I did something wrong. And Allah revealed this ayat of the Quran. Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, la takhunu Allah wa rasul. O those who have believed, do not betray Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Wa takhunu amanatakum wa antum ta'lamun. And do not betray the trust knowingly. Allah and His Rasul gave you this trust. That no one knew what was about to happen to them, but you gave away that trust. Abu Lubaba said, as soon as I did this, I realized I made a mistake. I should have never done that. So what he said is that I took myself, I ran off, and I tied myself to the column of the masjid of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I tied myself, and I said, I will not eat, I will not drink, or either until Allah sends my forgiveness or I die in this place. Because I made a mistake. I should have never done what I've done. So he said 7 days and 7 nights passed that Abu Lubaba was tied to this pillar. And finally the revelation came that Allah has forgiven Abu Lubaba. And we all know what ended up happening was that Sa'ad radiallahu anhu, this is a side story. Sa'ad radiallahu anhu put Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam on one side, he put the leaders of Banu Qurayza on one side, he drove right into the middle, he called the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he called the leader of Quraysh, he said, raise your right hand and take a promise that whatever I say, you will do what I say. And of course, they both said yes. And then of course, Sa'ad radiallahu anhu said that all of you should be finished for those who stood as warriors against Allah and His Rasul. The women and children should be safe and they should not be taken and should not be harmed in any way. So we all know what happened to them afterwards, but I want to go back to the story of Abu Lubaba with this ayat of the Quran. So Abu Lubaba radiallahu anhu said, I'm not going to untie myself, even though his forgiveness came. And he says, until Allah's Rasul does not come and untie me with his own hands, I'm not going to leave this place. So the Nabi of Allah ﷺ came and he untied him. And at this moment he says, now my tawbah has been perfected. And then he said, for those people and that wealth that I made that wrong gesture and decision, I give all of this as sadaqah. Meaning I will leave the company of those people and I'll give all of my mal and wealth as sadaqah. And the Nabi of Allah ﷺ said, oh Abu Lubaba, 1/3 of your mal is enough as a sadaqah. If you have been to Medina, and may Allah allow us to be in Mecca and Medina and Haramain with ease and comfort. If you've ever been to Madinatul Munawwara, there are a few columns in the Masjid of the Prophet ﷺ that has a very special writing on top. And they are known as Istiwana Aisha, the column of Aisha radiallahu anha, the column of the guests, the column of the captives. These are different columns within the masjid. One of the columns right next to the mimbar of Rasulullah ﷺ is called Istiwana Abu Lubaba. It still exists till today. There's a pillar named after that. And it is mentioned that anyone who asks for tawbah and dua, their dua is not rejected next to that maqam. Right? This is not from the hadith, but it's mujarrab over time. That pillar still exists till today. That may Allah take us and allow our eyes to visit and witness Madinatul Munawwara and Haram Makkah. You will see that. It says Istiwana Abu Lubaba. It's still there written that this is the column of Abu Lubaba al-Mundar al-Ansari radiyallahu anhu. So as a reminder, again, this is an ayat of the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals in the 9th juz, 8th surah, Surah Al-Anfal, verse number 27, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, la takhunu Allah wa rasul. Do not betray Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and do not betray the trust Allah has given you knowingly. According to a majority of the Mufassirun, this ayat of the Quran was revealed for Abu Lubaba radiallahu anhu on the day when Banu Qurayza were about to take the decision made by Sa'ad bin Mu'az radiallahu anhu. And at this moment, when he gestured towards them, he felt so guilty for what he had done. He asked Allah forgiveness through this amal. Brothers and sisters, there are times and moments in our lives that we may also make mistakes, but don't lose rahmah in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Realization of our mistake is the key towards coming back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Till we don't realize that we have made a mistake, we will never be able to make tawbah. So the number one thing for us is to realize, recognize, and admit, Ya Allah, I'm weak. Oh Allah, I made a mistake. Oh Allah, I want to change. Oh Allah, I want to come back towards you. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can forgive the largest and the biggest of the mistakes and open the doors of rahmah. May Allah give us the love of Sahaba, ittiba of Sahaba. فَمَنْ أَحَبَّهُمْ فَبِحُبِّي أَحَبَّهُمْ وَمَنْ أَبْغَضَهُمْ فَبِبُغْضِي أَبْغَضَهُمْ. You hear this in khutbah every Jummah. What does it mean? I'll conclude with this. فَمَنْ أَحَبَّهُمْ فَبِحُبِّي أَحَبَّهُمْ. For those who love Sahaba, they love them because they love Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And وَمَنْ أَبْغَضَهُمْ. And for those who keep bughd and hatred for Sahaba, is not because they don't like Sahaba, it is the hatred of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the love of Sahaba is a sign towards the love of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May Allah give us ittiba to live the lives. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu.